Hello everybody. This video is based on the second chapter of the 10th Standard English Reader. The chapter is titled The Snake and the Mirror, and it is a short story written by Vaikam Muhammad Bashir. Bashir, who is otherwise known as Bepur Sultan, is someone who needs no introduction. He was a humanist, a freedom fighter, novelist and short story writer born in our very own state, Kerala. The writer is known for his unique style of mixing humor and pathos. Pathos is a quality which awakens emotions such as pity, sorrow, etc. His major works include Balyakala Sakhi, Pathumeda Ada, Madilugal, etc. So, before we begin today's class, before I start narrating the story, I have a question for you all. Here we go. Has a snake ever coiled itself round any part of your body? That too, a full-blooded cobra. Yes? No? Are you wondering what to say? Or are you wondering about the weirdness of my question? Well, this is exactly the question that the protagonist or the main character of the story, The Snake and the Mirror, asks his friends. And what do you think their answers were? What do you think the answers of his friends were? Just like you, they all fell silent. The topic came when they were discussing snakes. The protagonist of the story is a homeopath. A homeopath is a person who treats illness or disease using homeopathic methods. In short, our hero is a homeopathic doctor. One day, as he was sitting and chatting with his friends, the topic of snakes came up. That's when the doctor asked his listeners this question: has a snake ever coiled itself around any part of your body? A full-blooded cobra. All his listeners get so intrigued and they start listening attentively as the doctor begins his tale or story. Now we're going to make a journey into the doctor's past, and I'll tell you when we return to the present. At the time the incident happened, the doctor was a young bachelor who lived alone in a small rented room that had no electricity. He had just started his medical practice and his earnings were very less. He had about 60 rupees in a suitcase and also some shirts and dhotis and one black coat as his belongings. One hot summer night, after having his meal or his supper from a hotel, the doctor returned to his room. The time was around 10 o'clock. As he opened the door of his small room, he heard a noise from above. He dismissed or ignored the sound as it was one that he heard quite often. He knew that it was a sound of rats. He and the rats shared the room. He got inside the room and lighted the kerosene lamp on the table using a matchbox. The doctor at that time was wearing the only black coat he had and he removed it. He also removed his white shirt and his not so white vest and hung them up. By the way, a vest is a sleeveless garment that is usually worn under a shirt. The room that the doctor lived in was an outer room with one wall facing the open yard. It had a tiled roof with long supporting gables that rested on the beam over the wall. You can see the picture of the gable on the screen. This room had no ceiling. Rats always ran to and fro on the beams. Well, enough of the room. Let's get back to the story. Because the night was particularly hot, the doctor opened the two windows of his room to let the air in. He made his bed. It was bedtime, so he made his bed and pulled his bed close to the wall. But because of the heat and humidity, he just couldn't sleep. And he got up and went out to the veranda, hoping to get some fresh air. But to his utter disappointment, he found that there was no breeze there at all. He returned to his room and sat down on the chair. He took out a book titled The Materia Medica from a box under the table and tried reading it. On the table on which he kept the book were a lamp and a mirror. There was a small comb, C-O-M-B, pronounced comb, that lay by the side of the mirror. The doctor was feeling so bored, and because he didn't know what else to do, he decided to take a look into the mirror, something that we all do. The doctor says that in those days he was a great lover of beauty and he believed in making himself look handsome. He was so proud of the fact that he was a bachelor and a doctor. He wanted girls to look at him. Sitting there in front of the mirror, he picked up his comb and ran it through his hair, making it look neat and straight. While he was thus combing his hair, he heard that sound from above. Again. Once again ignoring the sound, the doctor took a closer look at himself in the mirror and made one of the most important decisions of his life. What was that decision? He decided to shave daily and to grow a mustache. He was not exactly satisfied with how he looked and he wanted to look more handsome. He was, after all, a bachelor and a doctor. He looked into the mirror and smiled one of his most charming smiles. Wow! He loved the way he smiled. He felt that his smile was so attractive, and then and there, he made another earth-shaking decision. He decided to always keep that attractive smile on his face. Well, are you wondering why he took all these important decisions? Well, the answer is quite simple. He wanted to look more handsome. He was, after all, a bachelor, and above everything else, he was a doctor. Once again, that noise came from above. The doctor got up from his chair, lit a beedi, and started walking up and down his room. As he was walking so, another lovely thought came to his mind. He decided that he would get married. What a fantastic thought, what a fantastic decision. He made up his mind to get married to a woman doctor who had plenty of money and a good medical practice. He also decided that he would only marry a fat woman. The doctor had his own reasons for thinking so. He did not want his wife to run after him and catch him if he did some silly mistake and wanted to run away. So if his wife was fat, she wouldn't be able to run so fast. This was his logic for deciding to marry a fat lady. With all such beautiful and glorious thoughts about his looks, his future wife and life, he went back and sat down once more on the chair in front of the table. There were no more sounds from above. Suddenly, there came a dull thud, as if a rubber tube had fallen to the ground. The doctor felt there was nothing to worry about, because he was almost sure it was the rats making all that sound. Even then, he thought that he should turn around and take a look, just to be 100% sure. No sooner had he turned than a fat snake wriggled over the back of the chair and landed right on his shoulder. The doctor's turning around and the snake's landing on his shoulder both happened at the same time. He didn't jump, he didn't tremble, he didn't cry. There was no time to do all these. The snake moved along his shoulder and wound or coiled around his left arm above his elbow. The snake's hood was spread out and it was just 3 or 4 inches away from the doctor's face. He sat there like a stone image in flesh, holding his breath. Even though his body had turned into a stone statue, his mind started thinking of various ways to escape from the snake. He thought of how his door opened into the darkness and how his room was filled with darkness except for the light of the lamp. For the first time that night, he felt the presence of God. He became completely certain about the existence of God. He felt like he had thought or said something that God didn't like, and now God was punishing him with the snake. He tried in his imagination to say sorry to ask sorry to God. He called on God with all his heart and mind without opening his mouth. Meanwhile, he felt as if his left arm was being crushed by the weight of the snake. Remember, the snake was still coiled around that arm. What would he do? He knew that even a very light movement would provoke the snake to strike or bite him. Death was waiting for him just 4 inches away. The doctor thought of how foolish and stupid he was for not keeping any medicines in the room. Even if the snake struck him, there were no medicines to take. The thought was he was so stupid and foolish brought a weak smile onto the doctor's face in spite of the danger that he was in. Well, maybe God appreciated the doctor's humility because at that moment, the snake turned its head, looked into the mirror, and saw its reflection there. The snake seemed to be enjoying its own beauty in the mirror. Was a snake trying to make an important decision about growing a mustache or using eyeshadow and mascara or you wearing a bindi on its forehead? What was the snake thinking looking at itself in the mirror? The doctor wondered. Well, he didn't know anything for certain. He didn't know if the snake was male or female or any such details. As he was thinking about how he didn't know anything about the snake released its grip on the doctor's arm and slowly crawled into his lap. From there, it crawled onto the table and moved towards the mirror. Maybe it wanted to enjoy its beauty from a closer angle. The moment he was free from the snake, the doctor, still holding his breath, got up from the chair. He quietly went out through the door into the veranda. From there, he jumped into the yard and ran for his life. Just as the doctor finished narrating his encounter with the snake, all of his friends heaved a sigh of relief. Oh, what a relief. So now we are back in the present. The doctor is seated with his friends and he has just finished narrating his story. They all light beedies and one of them asks the doctor this question. Doctor, is your wife very fat? Remember, the doctor had dreamt of marrying a fat woman. The doctor replied, No, God willed otherwise. My life companion is a thin, reedy person with the gift of a sprinter. What an irony. He had wanted to get married to a fat woman who wouldn't run so fast. But now he was married to a pencil-thin woman who could run as fast as an athlete. Someone else asks the doctor another question. Doctor, when you ran, did that snake follow you? The doctor replied that day he ran and ran until he reached a friend's house. As soon as he reached there, he applied oil all over himself and took a bath and changed into fresh clothes. The next morning at about 8:30, he took his friend and 1 or 2 others to his room because he didn't have the courage to return to his room alone. He went with the intention of moving his things from there. He no longer wanted to leave there. But when they reached there, they found that they had little to carry. Some thief had carried away most of his things. The room had been cleaned out except for one thing. The thief had left that one thing behind as a final insult. What was that? A friend of the doctor asked him. The doctor replied, My vest, the dirty one. The fellow had such a sense of cleanliness. The rascal could have taken it and used it after washing it with soap and water. The doctor felt so insulted because he felt that the thief had a greater sense of cleanliness than him. Did you see the snake the next day, doctor? So one of his friends questioned if he had seen the snake the next day. The doctor laughs and replies that he had never seen it since that day. He said it was a snake which was smitten by its own beauty.